Today we're going to be talking about Hoya propagation. We have a couple different types of Hoya here that I brought in. This is one of the more common types we see, the Hoya publicalis. We have the Hoya curtisii and a Hoya obscura. So there's lots of different ways to, propagate Hoyas. Everyone has their favorite method, so hopefully with some practice you'll be able to figure out what you like. I'll start with this guy. As you can see, there's lots of little nodes on this one, lots of really good aerial roots coming out. So when we say node, what we're talking about is just where these leaves come out of. That's going to be where the nodes are located on Hoyas. Hoya nodes can put out growth at any time. So when you cut your Hoya, think about where it's going to branch out. Cutting right here means that it's probably going to send out a shoot here or basically right beneath where you cut it. So for this curtisii, I'm going to go ahead and chop it right here because we've got some nice aerial roots. Those are going to help it propagate easier. Be careful when you're cutting them. Hoyas, when they're cut, put out this white kind of sticky sap that's a little can be a little irritating if you have skin allergies and sensitivities. But that's normal. That's what they do. They're just trying to heal their cut. So I'm going to go ahead and start with something that is called the butterfly method for Hoyas. That is basically where you're going to cut a piece off at each node. So this is going to be one node, one potential little shoot of plant, and then I'm just going to cut along each node. You want to make sure that the nodes you cut have a set of leaves. It's just going to help them photosynthesize and grow easier. So when you're taking a cutting of the portion that is already growing and there's not any developed leaves along the node yet, there's these little baby leaves right here. Be careful with those. If you knock off these little sets of baby leaves, it won't really ever put out a new set of leaves there. It'll keep growing and it'll put out leaves on future nodes, but it'll never be replaced. So I'm going to keep this piece of the cutting as it is. It's got some small leaves on it. Ideally you want big leaves, but I've propagated them lots before, so it's not going to be a big deal. Water propagation is super popular and it's easy. I really like it because you can see when the roots start developing and you can just stick it in. Ideally you want to make sure that you're getting the nodes in there. So for this piece, I'm actually going to put it in some soil because I don't want to take off these little leaves. Soil propagation is super easy, super straightforward. It's my favorite way to do with Hoyas because you don't have to deal with taking them out of the other medium to then plant them in soil. You would just basically want to make sure that these little aerial roots that it's developed are in the soil, and you want to try to get the node as close to the soil as you can without burying the leaves. Ideally, you could also take the leaves off, but I like to keep as many leaves on as I can because it's going to help them grow quicker and photosynthesize faster. Okay, so just a small disclaimer. So when you're propagating most plants, especially Hoyas, ideally you're going to let them, after you cut them, you're going to go through a process called hardening off, which is where you're just going to let it sit. And like I was talking about earlier, this white sap that's coming out of the Hoya, that's the plant basically trying to scab over and heal itself. It's best to, before you plant it in soil, before you put it in sphagnum, any method that you're doing, it's best to let it harden off, and that's basically just letting it dry out. For a Hoya, that can be anywhere from 1 to a few hours. It's not going to really hurt them if you get busy and you accidentally leave them out overnight. I'm definitely guilty of that. But hardening off is your best protection against fungal issues and a lot of other things that can happen when you're propagating. Next, I wanted to go over a method that is really popular right now. People love to use Spacklemoss. Some caveats or some, disclaimers for these is that you want to make sure you soak your moss before you use it. Most sphagnum is going to come dry, so definitely soak it. I like to put some fertilizer in mine, whatever you like. We use super dry here usually. If you do have another plastic piece, another popular way to do it is to put it in a dome or a cloche. You could use an old takeout box, you could use plastic bin you have lying around. The main thing is it just needs to be clear so that it can get sun. But if you were to put another plastic piece on top of it like this, that's just going to raise the humidity and it's going to help it root even faster than it would without it. So that is a fun method. Another way that is also popular is going to be using perlite. I'm going to go ahead and cut off these lower leaves next to the node to basically expose more of the node and the stem with the roots. So you basically just want to get it in there, but allow the leaves to stick out. And you could do the butterfly method in perlite as well if you wanted to. So you would just take this, try to keep what roots you can, try to get them in there without covering the leaves up, which is, your main challenge for this. Another question we get a lot about Hoyas is what to do when you have a runner. These, they go by different names. I've always called them runners. They're basically just vines that are searching for somewhere to grow. I like to put my Hoyas on trellises. You can just let them vine out. But regardless of what you do, they're gonna form runners. It's not anything about care or environment. That's just their nature. They grow in tropical forests where they're trying to climb trees and get as much light and space as they can. So they're inevitably gonna be looking for something more to climb onto. The runner, they are gonna grow leaves eventually. If you can see on here, I'm not sure because they're so tiny. But this is going to be nodes on the runner. And next to the nodes are these tiny little green spots are baby leaves. And the tiny white spots are aerial roots. Those baby leaves will form leaves one day when the runner feels secure enough. So I could twist it onto this trellis and it would make leaves. But the main thing you want to know is that if you knock off the baby leaves, they're never going to grow back. It's not going to put new leaves out. It'll put them down further down the vine. But if you really wanted to, you could just trim it off. I don't like doing that. I would prefer to keep it on and wrap it up. But if you do trim it off, since this portion has no leaves, you can always try, but it's unlikely that it would be something that you could propagate to make the plant fuller. So just wanted to address that because we get that question a lot, and they're constantly doing this, especially the Hoya publicalis. This one is pretty notorious for putting out runners all of the time. So if you did cut off the runner, it would just put out new growth on any of these nodes. Unlike philodendrons, Hoyas can put out almost infinite growth from one node. With a philodendron, we typically think it's kind of a one and done situation where once the node puts out a growth point, it's spent. It's a spent node. With Hoyas, you don't have to worry about that. They're a little more forgiving. So if you do cut somewhere you don't, want to, just give it a chance to grow. It'll probably come back for you. Yeah, so if you have any questions or want any clarification, you can always leave us a comment and let us know, and we'll get back to you. But thank you so much.